Speaking from a father's perspective, I do not want any other father to hear that her daughter has gone missing like I did. No other father will have to see their daughter's body in the mortuary.
Viewer discretion is advised for this educational documentary. Welcome back to CASE Documentaries. I bring you true crime, disturbing stories and other things that you may later regret knowing with regular uploads every week. Please do join the quickly growing, incredibly supportive CASE family by hitting subscribe now and turning on notifications. Thank you so much to all of my patrons. If your name is on screen right now, then you're a legend. Our love and respect goes out to all those that knew and loved India and all those affected by this dark case. India Chipchase was born on Christmas Eve in 1995 to her loving parents Jeremy and Suzanne in Northampton, England. While being born during the holidays doesn't guarantee a Christmas spirit, everyone knew India as someone with a huge love for Christmas and a vibrancy that was unmistakable. She was described as energetic, vibrant and brave. The people who knew India well said that you couldn't ignore the way that she lit up a room whenever she walked inside. She had a way of bringing a positive energy with her wherever she went, making every moment exciting, with her mother saying she thrived in chaos. India cared about people, and this is why when she grew old enough, she decided to pursue a degree in health and social care. After finishing her degree, she wanted to help solidify her commitment to helping people by applying to become a paramedic. While many people in her life were surprised by this decision, India's family knew that she would excel in a position such as this, with her ability to make every negative moment a positive, as well as being able to work well under pressure. India showed promise in her chosen career path. She was now hopeful for her future at just 20 years old. Northampton is located in the East Midlands of England. It stands as a historic market town on the banks of the River Nen. With a population of over 200,000, Northampton is a pretty vibrant town. It kind of matches the energy that India brought. It is situated pretty much within an hour of both London and Birmingham. If you've heard of Northampton before, it's probably due to its history of shoe production. Education also plays a significant role in Northampton, with the University of Northampton being a prominent institution. However, this is balanced with the town's dedication to sports like rugby, with the famous Northampton Saints having a passionate fan base. It was here that India had endless opportunities for the future at her fingertips. Opportunities that sadly she would never get to pursue. On January the 29th, 2016, India and a group of friends went to NB's, a cocktail bar and nightclub, to spend their evening laughing, dancing and enjoying some drinks. After consuming 6 Jaeger bombs as well as several other drinks, India realized that she had become separated from her friends. In a state of intoxication, she ventured outside to search for them. However, she saw no sign. When she tried to go back inside to continue her search, she was denied entry by security. Now stranded on the streets, the once joyful night proved to become simply frustrating for India. She was now left to try and figure out what to do next. Meanwhile, India's friends that were still inside the bar also realized that India had become separated from the group, and they now began looking for her too. When there was no sign of her inside the club, they figured that India had gone home without them. They simply hoped to catch up with her the following day. It was now 1 a.m. India was stood outside the bar in the cold, wondering what to do. This was when she turned to the doorman. She asked him to help her call a cab, telling him that she just wanted to go home. The doorman, in response, walked out onto the curb, and there he flagged down a taxi for her. When India got into the cab, due to her level of intoxication, the cab driver asked her to pay him the cab fare up front. This only made India more frustrated, her night now getting even worse. She decided to exit this cab and tried to think of another option to get home. She was now stranded on the side of the road. She was in no real state to try and get home on her own. She took out her phone and tried to call her boyfriend several times. However, she was left with no answer. Returning once again to the doorman, she told him again she wanted to go home, but he was now too busy to help her at all. However, before he went inside the club, he did tell one of his co-workers to keep an eye on her. India, unsure of what to do next, sat on the curb, crying as she searched through her phone, desperately trying to find a way to get home. This moment is when a bystander noticed India in distress. They asked her if she needed help in getting a ride home. The man promised that he would get India home safely, and she hesitantly agreed. She allowed him to help her to call a new taxi. The man now took her by the arm, helping her off the pavement. He aided her in putting her phone away, and he called a new taxi. After helping her inside the car, the man climbed in behind her and shut the door. At around 3 a.m, India's boyfriend had received her numerous missed calls from hours earlier. He attempted to return her calls several times, now obviously concerned. But at this time, he only received her voicemail. Thinking she was still probably out partying, he made the decision to go back to sleep, anticipating that he would speak to her later that morning, sharing the stories of the night. Over 12 hours passed. It was now 4 p.m. on January the 30th. India's parents received a call from her co-workers at the Collingtree pub and restaurant where India worked as a barmaid. India's parents immediately became fearful. It was at this time they learned that India had never arrived at work for her shift that day. Wasting no time with this news, they immediately called the police to report their daughter as missing. The police thankfully immediately became involved in her disappearance. This was especially since it had been over 12 hours since anyone had heard from her. A search for India was launched. Police now worked to trace India's footsteps back as far as they could. Since the last place that India was seen was NB's bar with her friends, police worked to recover CCTV footage from outside the bar. A few hours later, officers received the footage, and now they watched India's every move. They watched as India became increasingly more intoxicated with her friends, slumped over the bar and dropping her purse on the floor. They watched as India stumbled outside. She appeared lost and confused as she tried to find her friends, and then the realization that she just needed to go home. They watched her interactions with the doorman, how she had gotten into a cab and angrily gotten back out and then sat on the curb in tears. The real point of interest, though, was the mysterious man, the man that helped her off of the sidewalk and into another cab. One of the officers, to their surprise, recognized the man who had gotten into the cab with India. It was a man named Edward Tenniswood. While officers tried to discern the next steps after this breakthrough, back at the station, investigators worked to trace the pings from India's phone. They looked at her mobile data after she left the bar, tracking her location to 2 separate McDonald's restaurants, to a BP petrol station, and to a residential address. While CCTV footage continued to be analysed, they watched as various cameras captured India's cab journey. They could match up the CCTV footage to each of the pings from her phone. This was the best case scenario. After only hours, the police had obtained CCTV footage that traced India's every move, matching the locations to her phone signal and an address for her most recent destination, along with the name of a mysterious person that seemed to have travelled alongside her. All that was left to do was to see if the name and address belonged to this same mysterious man. After pulling Edward Tenniswood's records, police soon found that the address where India's phone last pinged was, in fact, his address. They wasted no time on rushing to the location, obtaining a search warrant so they could enter the address. After knocking on the door announcing their presence with no response, police broke down the front door and barreled inside. An armed search ensued, and officers covered every inch of the squalid property. After securing the first floor, investigators journeyed upstairs to the second. This is where they discovered the horrifying sight of India's lifeless body. She was covered by a plastic sheet, her hair arranged into a halo shape above her head. Devastated by the sight, officers called the necessary authorities. The case was now transferred to a homicide investigation.
India Chipchase went clubbing on Friday night, but never returned home. A day and a half later, the 20-year-old's body was found by police. She was dating the rugby player Ivan Rihana from New Zealand, who's currently with a team in Bordeaux. Today, in an online tribute, he dedicated his career to her. Honestly can't believe to think even now that you have left us in that way, he wrote. I honestly hope that you rest in peace, hun, and that I will be playing for you for as long as I know.
As officers quickly turned their attention to locating Tenniswood, India's body was removed from the home and sent to be examined by a professional. Luckily for police, Tenniswood took no precautions whatsoever to hide his whereabouts. He was captured on CCTV footage checking into a nearby hotel just hours earlier. Tenniswood was sitting in the hotel lobby watching TV when officers walked through the front doors. When they approached him, Tenniswood looked at the officers and said, "I'm surprised you were so quick. It didn't take you long to find me." After arresting him on suspicion of homicide and searching his person, Tenniswood was carrying a bag which contained a sharp kitchen utensil and latex gloves. He had scratches on his face, indicating even greater suspicion. Meanwhile, a medical examiner had completed an evaluation of India. They marked the cause of her passing as blunt force trauma along with pressure on the neck, which was consistent with an assault. Additionally, Tenniswood's DNA was discovered to be under India's fingernails, solidifying the case that something horrifying had happened to her. All fingers pointed to Tenniswood. It was also clear that India didn't go down without a fight.
To think something like that's happened on my own doorstep, it's just destroys whoever's mother that is. My heart goes out to her because me having children, you just never wouldn't have thought that. Literally, I'm in shock, that much shock. It's hard to talk.
It makes you feel scared as to what else can go on. So it's not a very nice thing to happen. And I saw her picture on Facebook and she looked a lovely girl. To think that she's been killed, it's terrible.
Made job at this pub. Her friends and the regulars have been remembering the girl they laughed and drank with.
And it was, it just saddened me at the thought of someone who's got all her life ahead of her to live has been sadly taken from us.
Mark Salter told me he'd last spoken to his friend just a week ago.
Personality-wise, fantastic. You know what I mean? She was a real people's person, and the community is saddened at her loss.
In a whirlwind of just one day, police had learned of India's absence, discovered her body, found a huge amount of evidence, and arrested the man who was likely responsible. They now had to make sense of what had actually occurred before Tenniswood's trial would begin. By the start of Tenniswood's trial, police had gathered enough evidence for the prosecution to weave together the events that had occurred after Tenniswood had gotten into the cab with India. According to the cab driver, Tenniswood had instructed him to take them to 2 separate McDonald's locations, followed by a BP petrol station, where Tenniswood left the car for a few minutes. During this time, India called her boyfriend once again. After his return, he instructed the taxi driver to take them to a location just a few hundred yards away from his home. There, they exited the car. Tenniswood then escorted a disorientated, stumbling India into his home. Once they had gotten inside, India sent multiple Snapchat messages to friends. They were pretty unintelligible, and they never received a reply. The prosecution asserted that it was at this point that Tenniswood tried to engage in relations with India, knowing that she was without the mental capabilities at this time to stop it. When India tried to refuse Tenniswood's advances, he ragefully pressed his hands around her neck. He did this until she stopped resisting, finishing the deed. According to the prosecution's chain of events, Tenniswood then left his home, checked into the nearby hotel, drinking and eating excessively until he was located by the police. His act was rageful, selfish and unrelenting, choosing to end someone's life when they failed to adhere to his wishes. The defense, however, spun an entirely different story. In a rambling, gruesome account of the day's events, an account that spared no detail, Tenniswood explained how he had dated a multitude of highly successful women, keeping pictures of them in his home. One of these women, according to Tenniswood, was Heather Stewart White, a famous model. He detailed how he had only planned to take India back to his house for drinks, despite onlookers saying that they heard India repeatedly saying that she just wanted to go home. But after arriving at his home, the two had, according to him, loving, consensual relations where India then asked him to place his hands around her neck. As a result of, and I quote, inexperience and incompetence, Tenniswood asserted that he didn't know he had applied too much pressure during these moments. He explained, I, in my over-eagerness to please her, either sustained the pressure just too long or just gripped too tightly. He believed that she had passed out as a result of it and, thinking she was okay, he then went to sleep for a few hours. When he awoke, he discovered that India was no longer breathing. He said he now realized what he had done. Disturbingly, he said he then cuddled up next to her for a few hours, but he then got hungry and left to get some food. This is when he arrived at the hotel where he stayed at until the police found him. The prosecution quickly shut down the story, calling it nonsense and saying Tenniswood was just an oddball. The way that he had spoken while on the stand made it clear that he enjoyed every second of his recount of the events, leaving those who heard it squirming in their seats at his delight and disgusting detail. While the judge urged Tenniswood to keep his explanation short and sweet, he refused to listen, reveling in the memory of what he had done. He wanted to bring a dummy into court to further illustrate his points, discussing how his body contained more wine than blood when he met India. As India's family members became increasingly upset by Tenniswood's testimony, the judge ordered the jurors to leave the courtroom, believing that they needed a break from Tenniswood's chilling account. After more hours of Tenniswood rambling, going off topic and becoming angry when the judge and lawyers attempted to stop him, the prosecution needed to do little to argue against him. This man was revealing exactly who he was. It took the jury only 1 hour and 45 minutes to find Edward Tenniswood guilty of the assault and homicide of helpless India Chipchase. Her family wept as the verdict was read. During sentencing, the judge explained the crime was one of utter depravity, obviously disgusted by what everyone had just heard.
We would like to thank a number of people and organisations for their help and support during what has been an extraordinarily traumatic experience. Firstly, we cannot thank Northamptonshire Police enough for the speed of response and the professionalism shown by everyone at the force throughout the investigation, not least by how quickly India was found and the suspect arrested. The police's guidance and support has been outstanding. India's friends have also been bedrock of support for us. India had a wide group of friends, both at work and in her leisure time, and everyone has gone out of their way to help us. Nothing has been too much trouble, and the strong feelings that India's friends have had for her have given us plenty of comfort and inner strength at this time.
Tenniswood was sentenced to life in prison, ordered to serve a minimum of 30 years. He will be 82 years old when and if he is eligible for release. Do you think the punishment fits the crime here? What do you think could be done to avoid something like this happening again in the future? Please do let me know down in the comments. If you appreciate the work that I'm doing here, please do hit that like button. Be careful out there, and I'll see you soon.